Hello, Ben here from Supercoach Insider with a brand new series called The Road to Round 1. This is my team for January. Before I move on though, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everyone. Today brought to you by splashvodka.com.au. In case you haven't seen us before, or if you'd like to find us, we're Supercoach Insider, so SC Insider 100 on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok as well, all the audio platforms as well, so Spotify, Soundcloud, Stitcher, you name it. Check out our podcast, check out our usual segments as well. I hope you like this little bit of preseason content. So it's a little bit different. You're going to be able to track, Chris, Swizz, and myself through the preseason and how our team kind of evolves, ultimately leading to our pre-round 1 team reveal just before the season there as well. So first things first, let's get this out of the bat, straight out of the gate. Everyone has different opinions. Right, last year I had so many people shitting on me, telling me, oh, you have to go Gawn and Grundy and you have to go set and forget, and I just wasn't sold. I wasn't 100% sure on it, so I ended up going English as my R2 to buy me some time in case they weren't the set and forget that we expected, and I had so many people disagree with me last year. I think Chris ended up following me through when they were just playing the one ruck for the Bulldogs, so kind of back yourself in. So the preseason, let's get things out of the way. Everyone believes they're right. They're never wrong. Everyone's going up in average. No one's going down. Everyone's biased. Everyone has their opinions, and that's cool. And the way I like to see things is, hey, you might listen to a little bit of us or a few, like Dr. Supercoach or Supercoach Elites, Jock Reynolds, all of these other guys take things that you might find relevant or useful and ultimately kind of make your own little jigsaw puzzle and put together a team that you like, right? Because everyone has different opinions, right? Abdul last year went absolutely nuts with a few of these left field selections and it served him well. So you got to back yourself in. I understand everyone has their own way of thinking of it. So I was checking out some of the comments on Chris's podcast and it did make me laugh a little bit. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. My team is definitely fraught with a little bit of danger at this current point in time. I'm hoping it stacks up. Again, early teams, but I do like the structure that I have, and I have some strategies and rationale behind it. So I'm going to get into it first of all. So we've got a fresh team here. We're going to go starting in defense. Now, the way I'm setting up my premiums is I'm looking for people that I can be fairly sure are going to be in that top sort of 6 to 8, depending on which line you're in, and that will hold me in good stead, because the last thing you want is a speculative, and yes, they might be more value and you save a little bit of money, but if they're not going to be top 6 to 8, then pretty much you're going to be losing points or you're going to have to try and trade them anyway. So I'm really trying to look at people who I can think are going to be starting off well. And straight away, very similar to I think Swizz and Chris as well, I really like Stewart and Dawson. So I had a few people saying, oh, but Tom Stewart doesn't play at home in Geelong until like round 6. But when you look at the stats for the last 2 years, he averaged really well at the MCG as well. Basically averaged the exact same as he did in Geelong. So I think they have, 6 out of their first sort of 11 games, I think, as at the MCG. So I think that'll hold him in good stead, and then having some more home games in the back end of the year. Plus, more importantly, he also has the good bye. So they have the second bye round. It's just them and the Gold Coast. So I think that'll help me really with the structure. I don't want to be loading up on too many back end bye players. So I want to try and front end a couple of those, because if there's only Geelong and the Suns missing, that's really going to help, particularly through those bye rounds. I can then start to target some others from the first bye, and that's how it sort of evolves. Dawson as well, I just think I can't see Dawson going below 100. He's done it for a couple of years running now. He's definitely young and evolving. I really rate him as a player, so I like watching him as well. And that's where I sort of sit with the premiums on that line. Now, I have thought about a third. If a third one stands up, I'm not too sold on a lot of other defenders. Sicily, I think, is overpriced, but I do like him. It leaves more questions than answers for me. So I am looking at Dacos. I'm watching him to see if he can sell me. There could be some value there. But unlike some of the others, I actually quite like some of the mid-prices in this defensive line, and there's a couple of reasons for it. So what I don't mind is I'm pretty much looking between Elliot Yeo and also looking at Hunter Clark. Now, the reason is, and Bose, put them in the same picture. So those three, I'm hoping that they have a pretty good preseason. I see them as value. Hunter Clark should be able to go 85, 90 in my opinion, if he has a fresh run of not getting injured or getting his face busted open. So I'm hoping that there is definitely a role for him there. New coach, I am watching to see what sort of role he plays. but I think he has someone and has a bit of scope to make me 100,000 and buy me some time. My strategy is also about having people that I think are best 22. So there is a slight shift. And I know Chris hates the mid-price sort of structure that I've gone with a little bit, and that's okay. Like, Chris has his own opinion, but I think previous years you didn't have the sub coming on guaranteed every game. I am trying to, so far, my strategy is to negate how many rookies I have. So if I have, guns and guns and rookies, I'm having 3 premiums, and then I'm having sort of 5 rookies. And I'm not sure that that's the right ploy at this current point in time, unless there's some really, really, really strong rookies that stand up. I'm trying to look for some of that other value on people that I think are best 22, just because I can sort of be sure that even if it might be a little bit slower, it's going to be at least a constant cash flow and cash gain. And that's the sort of strategy that I'm looking at. It is different to other years, so that's why I'm sort of looking at something else slightly different. So I am tossing up between Elliot Yeo and Hunter Clark, and then looking at Bose. So to start with, we'll go in Yeo. Hunter Clark's probably the safer one in at this point in time, but I am looking at him. Elliot Yeo, apparently he's running now. He's got some strength. He's got some explosion. He came out saying that he wants to try and get back into that midfield as well. So it looks like his body might be okay. I'm just waiting and seeing. But he is someone who could go 90 to 100. He's done it many times before. Even when he had the yo-yo effect, I think his averaging was like 88 on a bad year. So I'm hoping it's kind of back to the old Elliot Yeo. He's got a point to prove. He's also out of contract, which is probably another big swinging factor for me, because he has to get it together this year. Like, he literally has to. The money is going to be on the line. He's fit. He looks lean. I think 12 months ago I wouldn't have said the same, but he actually looks like he's physically fit. So I am waiting to see. But the reason I'm going for these couple of guys is, or looking at 2 out of the 3 possibly, is again to try and capitalize on some of these DPP changes that are occurring. So it's something different that wouldn't have been here a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, I probably wouldn't have been looking at this way. I probably would have just gone, with the guns and rookies approach a little bit more. But now you've got a few things. Number 1, we have the extra trades. We have the trade boost is number 2. We've also got these issues of some of these rookies now getting tapped out or getting subs. So that's going to be an issue. That's 3. And number 4, we've got these DPP changes that we never had, right? So you have to kind of evolve and think of different strategies. So for me, I'm looking at using these guys as maybe, they should be best 22. Bose maybe not, we'll see. He could be Hunter Clark. I've got room for that. But then trying to look at, okay, well, what's going to happen? Are any players going to be getting a DPP in defense round 6 or in the forward line? And then I can try and aggressively go sort of 1 down, 1 up and try and actually make that move. Now, the issue is if you're going guns and rookies, by round 6, you don't have anyone that's really kind of matured enough for cash. And then even then, you're going to have to do a double or triple downgrade, basically, to get enough cash flow in order to make your trade. And by that point, if you're bringing in quite a few rookies, it's like, well, how secure are they? So that's the kind of combinations that we're looking at. So I'm looking at trying to get people in my premium line that I can be sure in my mind that are going to be top of their lines, and then looking at, hey, like, Yo, Bose, Fife if he doesn't pull his stuff together. Any of these other mid-prices, like Hopper, I'm looking at aggressively trying to trade those up through round sort of 6 to 12 and trying to make some moves there. And that's how I'm looking at sort of trying to get more premiums in my side early by kind of flipping some of those mid guys to get to premiums. So that's where we're at with that. As far as rookies, I think Connor McKenna, I think, is one that, definitely looking for. I agree with Chris as far as I don't think the Lions have enough breaking speed. So we've got some good ball users. We've got some really good key tools, good marking ability. But I think our ability to rebound quickly is sort of lacking a little bit. So I am really keen to see what he has in there, whether it's him, whether it's Sharp, because, he's Sharp's now obviously out of school, so he's a little bit older, what they're going to be doing in that sort of space. So that's where I'm sitting there with him. I also think that there was one last year. So Chesser, I'm thinking he could actually be a decent option if he gets his body right. So he was one that was, I think, about 150,000 last year, was touted to play but didn't. And then I'm kind of looking at sort of Wilmont or Gould, are kind of just tossing up. So these are just basically little place setters. I'm not 100% sure on them yet, but they're just going to be sitting in there, holding their place. Gould is just for shits and giggles. Maybe he'll actually get a gig, but I am also looking at Charlie Dean as well, because I think he is in the Collingwood's best 22. It's just he'll be very much a defensive key post. So it's going to be kind of a bit of a flip side as far as what sort of strategy I'm looking at for that. And that's my defensive line at the moment. Again, if there's a rookie that stands up, I could easily just pick one of Yo Bose or Hunter Clark, and then I'd probably be looking at maybe going and getting another defensive option, right? Like a Dacos if he stands up. So if someone really stands up in the preseason, then that's what I'd be looking at trying to do. One more rookie and trying to actually get an extra premium, but I'm waiting for that to be sort of proven. Alrighty, now into this midfield. Now I have gone a little bit more heavy. I've tried having like 5 deep as far as this midfield line, and trying to get some premiums that I sort of can rely on. So VC and C are very important to me. I think a lot of these prices are here. I've spoken before about, the standard deviation. I know, yes, midfielders are there. They cost more, so yes, they are going to lose more money. But at the same time, I would rather be trying to pick up a forward or a defender that's dropped down to low 500s than trying to fork out 600 plus for a midfielder. The other thing is that some people are banking on Clayton Oliver to have a poor round. Like, he's had one poor game the last few years at the start of the season. It's like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure he had, was it like a shoulder surgery and a few other surgeries in the preseasons going before this. He did have a thumb surgery to clean up something, but he's still running, so there's nothing concerning for this year. But if you're banking on them saying, they've had a bad round before, just to be able to afford them, then it's going to be hard for you to get the money. And we saw that last year. Clayton Oliver, if he didn't jump on early when he was like 620,000, he then went back up over 700,000 during the year with a nice run of games. Laird was another one, was so low owned because you just get priced out. You can't afford them, right? You are then trying to look at going, well, hang on, I can't pay $680,000, $700,000 for the year. So you end up picking someone else up like a Petraka or someone, for 530 or 550,000 because that's what you can afford. So I do recommend trying to spend up in the midfield early because they're there for the whole season. And I'm looking for people who should be top sort of 6 to 8, have been before. Great VC and C options. So I look heavily at those who score over 120, 130 plus because they're people that I actually want in there for that VC and C. But you can't fit them all in, and that's where it is a little bit of conjecture. So first of all, easily pick for me, Clayton Oliver. They have a pretty easy fixture to start. So when you kind of have a look, that's GWS right here, but Melbourne. So Dogs, Brisbane and Sydney, hard 3 games to start with, right? But then West Coast, Essendon, Richmond, North, Suns and Hawks. Right, I think that is a much easier fixture, and Clayton Oliver can definitely start tailing up through some of those rounds. So I'm definitely looking at starting Clayton Oliver to be a really reliable VC and C option for me, and he's my first one picked. Next one, I am looking at Neil, just again, Brisbane, a little bit of Brisbane bias. He has started well previously before. Am a little bit worried about the Dunkley factor. If it comes out in the preseason and they start talking about him doing other roles, then I'm looking at some other options there to kind of counter that. So I am a little bit worried about that. I'm looking also like Tuke Miller's one I have had in my side quite a little bit. Again, just because of that buy round that I really rate. Tuke also has a consistency to have some big scores for VC and C. He can get tagged or fall out of it a little bit with a couple of lower scores. And Gold Coast have a little bit of a harder start to the year for me. So I'm kind of just pausing on him a little bit, but I do really like Tuke in my side. I think I might just wait on that one, though. The next one I've got is, and again, I've been tossing up between Bontempelli and McRae. I think I was believing McRae probably had the most upside, so I've just put out some shorts as well and on TikTok saying, I think McRae has more upside based on Dunkley leaving because I think Dunkley forced McRae to play more wing and more outside. But then when you sort of look at, Rory Lobb's in there and the complement of Ugle-Hagan, Darcy and all these other players, Bruce coming back in, which we'll get into shortly. But I'm like, okay, well, maybe Bontempelli. If Bontempelli's a pure midfielder, I do think he has the most scope to hurt you. Again, I think he's the craze kind of fizzled out a little bit. He'll probably be a bit more of a role player. So I'm not sure what's going to happen there. Who's going to play the wing for the Dogs? So maybe Bontempelli at this moment is just taking his spot. So I'm kind of leaning towards Bont now just because on that hurt factor and that upside. So he is my third mid. The next one I actually am quite bullish on. I know Chris and Swizz weren't as much. Is Jack Steele. So Steele for me is probably the value pick of the bunch. New coach is an issue, but he was a top scorer. Again, very reliable, really good sort of 120 scorer generally. I think he's kind of in that mix to sort of start hitting his own now. I can't see anyone else really taking the mid sort of time off him or sharing it much. I believe that there's definitely a lot of scope for him to improve. So I'm really looking at him as a nice value option who should be that sort of top 6 to 8 anyway. And that's where I'm sort of sitting with him. Now, the fifth one, I did have Tuke, but based on, structure and setup, etc., I did have to sort of look for a slightly value option, and that's Tom Green. So it hurts. He's a GWS player on my side. But when you have a look at, their fixture to start with isn't too bad for the Giants. So, and the midfield is completely his. So they've got Adelaide first of all. I think he'd easily go heads up with any of those Adelaide midfielders. West Coast second of all. Carlton, Essendon. So Carlton only have, Cripps. So maybe it'll be Cripps on Green. That'd be a nice little monster show. Essendon there. Then the Hawks. And then it gets a little bit harder after that. So I could see Green getting off to a really nice start. I don't think he's going to be 334 or less for the rest of the year, basically. So I think he's my value pick to try and break into that top 10. And you could do a lot worse than having him as your M8 for the year. So I think it's his midfield. I think he's already spoken publicly saying these boys are going to have to stand up and take ownership of that midfield now. And he's got a high ceiling, high contested ball, good work rate, can push forward. I think he's definitely the package. Showed it in glimpses last year, averaged extremely well to start before I think he kind of lost that role. So it's his. So he's pretty much the one for me that's sitting there. Speaking of spending up big, the one that did get out of GWS that I am putting into my side is Hopper. So the GWS boys went across to Richmond basically because they were not very good at that contested ball and that pure gut midfield. So I think Hopper, if fit, should come straight in. If there is a cheaper option, for on field, then I would definitely consider it. But at this point, I think Hopper for 332 is probably the pick of the bunch around that price based on, the role he's going to be getting, etc. So again, I'd be trying to sort of look to convert him into a premium as quick as I can. The next one is Ashcroft. Now, there are some concerns with Ashcroft. I just think he's too talented to not be playing. Even Fagan, I think, said, he could have played 12 months ago. Like, that's how good he was. He pretty much, they played a bit of practice and, they'd give him a game next week. And that was early on. So I think he's definitely talented enough to be in that 22. It's just depending on what role he has. Can he adapt to sort of other roles, and seeing that through the preseason. But I think he's a no-brainer for me. He's probably one of the only draftees that I'm actually looking at picking up because I think there is value in other lines on people that have been in the system for a couple of years or people that have been injured. I'd much rather take a person that's coming off an injury than a rookie who hasn't played yet. It's harder for them to pick up the system. It's harder for them to play against full big body men instead of coming out of the school leagues. And I think there's definitely more scope for them to be able to keep their best 22. So Ashcroft is one there. The next one for me is Phillips. So I've spoken about him heaps. He had glandular fever twice last year, which would have sucked. I think the second one was around like June or July. Last preseason, apparently he was, killing it. He looked fit, etc. This guy has quads that could rival Ollie Wines as far as a junior level Ollie Wines. So I'm looking to see, hopefully he's put on a little bit more size and fitness. He was meant to be an inside sort of midfielder. He is fit. They're looking forward to him sort of seeing what he can do this year. So he's one for me that I would much rather start him. He was a third overall draft pick from 2020, and you're paying 158 instead of trying to pick a third round pick from this year for about $30,000 or $40,000 more. So he's been in the system for a few years. I think it's his time, and you're getting that discount. So I think it's definitely worth going there. Now, as far as play setters, I'm looking at Johnson to start just because Fremantle rated him last year. He had some injury issues, but again, he was someone that has now been in the system, and they do rate him. This is just a wishful thinking play setter in Blakely, Connor Blakely coming from Fremantle. Gold Coast, I think, already have quite a bit of competition in the midfield, but I'd be interested to see maybe with all of the injuries in defence, maybe Blakely could actually push into defence. I think he did that a little bit for Fremantle. So I could see maybe there'd be some issue, some work for him to be able to be done there. And if that's the case, he could get DPP. I'm waiting to see. I don't like that pick just yet, but he's, again, a place setter for me. And the last one is Sin for Port Adelaide. Someone who was heavily rated, didn't get much of a gig last year. You have a look, they've lost a couple of people sort of through that forward line. Maybe, he's a forward, but I think he's probably plays his best on the wing or in the back line, so sort of rebounding. But they did rate him. Bit of bad luck last year, so I'm hoping he's one, again, in the system for a year. That could be best 22. He's been biding his time, was a very high draft pick as well. So he's someone that I look could be breaking out this year. Now, the ruck line. For me, I'm kind of tossing up between Witts and English as my R1. Witts is probably getting the favour at the moment only because of his bye. I'm also kind of leaning towards, okay, well, why did he taper off at the back end of last year? Was it because he just came back from a big injury? So maybe as the year went on, he kind of started to get a bit fatigued. And is that the reason why he sort of slipped off the radar for the back end of the year? It feels weird picking Witts, though, as my R1, just because it is Witts. As someone who I haven't really rated highly for a couple of years previously. So English is one for me, I think. He, with, Lob coming into that team, I think the R1 is definitely English's. Even as we speak, I'm literally looking at just going Witts, English. And I know the issues are there, right? So as in, yes, he's had some injury issues. The big one for me is he's been knocked out and conservative on a knockout before. So when he's been concussed, they've taken about 2 or 3 weeks to get him back in to, tread carefully. That's probably a real big concern for me. But his ceiling, he's scored over 200 Supercoach before. He's also gone on absolutely massive heaters with some other really big Supercoach scores. I think the first kind of opponents he has as well aren't that strong. So, Melbourne first up. Saints will be probably a little bit of an easier one for the rucks there. Okay, so it looks like it's probably not the easiest ruck run, so don't mind me. So I think both of them I see. English could actually be the number one. It's just about whether he stays on the park. So Witts for the bye, I think, is probably getting the slight nod for me. I have kind of been tempted on starting 2 of those there, but I want to leave some room open to kind of get that R2 when they present themselves. So I'm hoping someone stands up in the preseason. I'm hoping that maybe someone else plays forward and they say Marshall's going to be playing the number 1 ruck. That would be awesome. Marshall would be on my side and I'd save 100,000. Looking at sort of what's going to be presenting, if Max Gawn is saying, hey, like I'm playing defense or I'm playing forward and Grundy's going to be the number 1 ruck, then I might actually consider that as well. So I'm kind of waiting for someone to present themselves. A lot of the rucks are fraught with danger. So Darcy was injured a lot last year. Riley O'Brien pretty much was on their shit heap, didn't do very well. Nick Nat-Nui isn't even training properly at this current point in time, so there's issues there. Max Gawn with his role, so there's just so much up in the air for that. So I think for me, Witts is someone who I could bank on to kind of go, okay, with that good buy round, so I'm not going to lose points. I'll probably pick up points through the buys, and that's probably where his value is. And that's what I'm sort of looking at the moment. So what does buy me time is going Darcy Cameron in that forward line. I think he'll push 90 to 100. He'll be a great sort of backup player if I do miss a week for a ruck. And I think he'll be very serviceable sort of through that forward line when I kind of end up pushing him there. So again, I'm waiting and seeing as to if a better option presents. But for me, I think at this point in time, I'll probably be looking at Darcy Cameron just because of that flexibility, that cover, and just the time it buys me to kind of work out who I want as my second ruck. Because there'd be nothing worse than locking in, hey, I'm going to go Witts and English, and it turns out neither of them are best 2 rucks. And then what? You're going to have to double trade a premium, or you're just going to have to sit and suffer in silence because you have to spend time and trades fixing other areas of your line, and you kind of get to them last. And by that point, you completely slip out of ranks. So that's it for that part of it. I'm hoping that there is a cheaper option that presents. Like Lloyd Meek, I think, is trying to fight for the number 1 ruck. He's got a bit of competition, so I'm not sold there. Lysette as well. Not sold there unless they tear up the preseason and light up a preseason game. I don't think I'm going to be tempted for them. Same as, Pitney, 386K. It's like, well, is he number 1 ruck? I just don't like the ruck line. So I'd rather probably just pay for that, wait and see, and I'll probably end up just going like a real nice, cheap sort of option. And I think it was the Madden, I think it is. There you go. So Madden is probably the one that I'm probably just going to park there to give me that flexibility once I do want it. So I've already put out a TikTok on this one. So Dunkley and looking at Taranto are my number 1 and 2. I actually just put out a tweet as well last night saying Chris wants me to take a bet on Taranto going 105 or more. I was a bit hesitant. I kind of nearly wanted to take it because Taranto can't kick properly. So, but he's averaged 100 without much mid-time. So I think if he's got a pure midfielder, he also was, I think, first for their 2K time trial in like 6 minutes. So he looks very fit. I think the midfield's his. He knows it's his. And so I think Taranto is definitely a good buy. So if you don't start him, he's probably the value pick of the bunch. For 500k, I'd rather start Taranto for 500k and instead of Dacos for 500k. I think they're kind of similar prices. I think Taranto can go 105. I think Dacos, we'll see, hopefully gets towards 100, but could easily go 95. And I think there's a little bit of danger there. So the next one is Fife. Now, I don't know why Fife is getting so much slack and shit because a double premiership player, they do have more competition in that midfield line. I get that. But for 313,000 on a guy you know is going to be best 22, again, I see even with Hopper, even if Fife just plays 50-50, gets some mid-time, if he's fit, if he looks pretty good, if he kicks a couple goals and gets some marks, he could go 80+ easily and just chip away for me until I decide to upgrade him. That's the worst case. Worst case scenario, he just absolutely shits the bed. I go and downgrade somebody and upgrade him to another premium. Round 6, let's say Bailey Smith becomes a forward in round 6. I'm like, yeah, Fife's not doing great. I go, cool, downgrade 1, Fife up to Bailey Smith, and then all of a sudden I'm ahead of the curb on everyone else that can't get Smith yet. So I think there are worse things in the world. Fife, when you kind of look at, injury and a few other things, I'm like, he's a Brownlow player who's averaged 110 or more so many years before, and you only need Fife to be at 80% as far as with the role, and I think he will still pull out some good scores. He still has a fairly high ceiling. If he impacts games, you only need him to get a couple of good games in a row, and bang, that cash gen spikes up a little bit, and then all of a sudden he's about 450,000, and then I can look at moving him on if I need to. Or he could be, you could have probably worse options as your F6 possibly for the year. So I know this divides a lot of people. But for me, I think he's going to be heavily started. And if it doesn't work out, I think if you're with the pack, it's not going to be as painful. If you don't jump on him thinking, Nat Fife, and he comes out and goes bang, 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 then you're going to end up trading him in anyway. The injury risk is still there. And then you kind of actually lost those scores and you're automatically behind. So I think it's probably safer to be with the pack on Fife than it is for probably any of these other players. I think Fife is probably the one that a lot of people are going to be getting in, and I think you probably just have to bite that bullet and join. And that's what I'm sort of looking at there. So this is where my team probably differs a little bit from others. So there's a lot of value. So I've spent up more in the midfield because, again, I already said that's where a lot of the points are, and I think there's a lot of value in that forward line. Now, people have mocked previously, so let's not forget, Darcy Cameron could go in that forward line, right? I have also considered putting someone else, like Fife into that midfield and spending that 530 from Green on somebody else. But again, I think Green averages more than Butters. Right? Butters is only 4K cheaper, 5K cheaper. I think Tom Green's going bigger than Butters for the same sort of price, so I don't really want to be putting a Fife or someone in that midfield. I think Cameron's probably good enough as that gap stopper to start in my ruck line instead of my forward line at this point in time. So I think there's a lot of value in this forward line. So when we talk about value, Oscar Allen is one, right? So Oscar Allen, he is West Coast, so it's not the greatest part on that one, right? But he will be best 22. He looks fit. Apparently, he's taken some real big steps forward so far this preseason. That could just be West Coast trying to sell memberships, but and he's also the one that I think could go as that second ruck, right? So Darling will probably park a little bit closer forward. I think Allen will get up the field a little bit more, and he's someone that I could possibly start. It's him. I'm also toying up between a couple of others, but at this moment, I'm looking at a couple of Dogs players, and the reason is, and I could be sold on a few different people, but at this current point in time, I'm looking at McLean, who could replace that sort of Dunkley role. did get a little bit of, came back, I think, back end of the season, final series, etc. Looked really good. I think he's super cheap, 178,000. If he's fit, came off an ACL, played at the back end of last year in the finals, didn't change his price. So I think there's definitely room for him to kind of fill the void on Dunkley. And the other one is I'm looking at Bruce. Now, if Bruce is looking at going to an intercept defender, I think it is an easy decision. 160,000 for a defender who can mark it and be an extractor there. I think that would be a very good role for Supercoach. We already know this. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm also looking at Ben King as well. So let me go Bruce. I'm also looking at Ben King as well as another one who would be best 22. Kingy is 176,000. So again, super cheap. Just came off an injury though, so that's my concern. Sometimes when you come off an ACL, like we saw with Rayner and a few others, it just takes you a little bit to get confidence. And if you're a big giraffe running around trying to get marks and all the rest of it, I think it's going to be maybe harder for him to kind of build in. So I'm a little bit more hesitant on him. At least Bruce, I think, did it, could have possibly come back at the end of last year, but didn't. So he's had a little bit more of a time recovery and a more friendly role. So that's where I'm sort of looking at for those. And then when we get into some of these rookies, again, place setters. So I've got Comben from North Melbourne, who apparently is doing really good stuff there as well. I've got Finlay McRae from the Collingwood side. And there's a few others that I am sort of looking at this current point in time. So I've got 35,000 left. Again, let's just see how this progresses through the preseason. But there are a few others. And again, people who have been in the system for a little bit of time, I'm just trying to sort of wait and see on what happens, but I'm not paying for like Sheasel or these other guys. I'm looking for people who have been in there for a little bit longer who should be best 22. So Radaglia is another one I'm watching if Geelong use him as a ruck finally, and or if they start to use him in that side. So there was some interest from, I think, Port Adelaide or someone else, but they kept him. So I'm waiting to see if Radaglia will actually stand up. And at this current point in time, there's just a blanket over a whole bunch of rookies waiting for someone to stand up. Thomas Berry went from Brisbane to the Gold Coast. Is there anything for him there? Blake Coleman, so Kitty Coleman's, I think, youngest. So see, maybe is he going to break out? There's definitely quite a little bit of value that have been in the system for a little bit longer. I think Fremantle also had someone. I wasn't sure where it was, but I think it's Sturt. Sam Sturt, I think it was, 123K. I think he might have even debuted a couple of years ago and had some injuries last year. So that's sort of what I'm looking at. That's my team for January so far. I'll keep you tracked and posted as far as how we progress through February, through March, and then ultimately for the first round. So that's where we're sitting. Let me know what you think. Let me know where you disagree and where you agree. Again, it's all opinion-based. Don't get upset. Let's just say, because if you are wrong, well, that's okay. If I'm wrong, that's okay. But hey, all I'm going to say is that usually I'm in that top 1%. Last year I finished 70th, so sometimes there is rationale to the madness, and I could completely throw out this whole structure as the preseason progresses, but this is just what I'm thinking as far as just currently what I like without having all the information on preseason, tracking, fitness, roles, and the rest of it, which will come over the next couple of months. So that's it from me. Please do like, subscribe, give us a shout out and comment, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.